You are listening to a pleasure podcast. For more from our sex podcast collective, visit pleasurepodcasts.com.
Welcome to American Sex, the award-winning podcast dedicated to challenging those puritanical, backward-ass ideals that we have in the U.S. I'm Sunny Megatron, and my co-host is Ken Melvoin Berg. We're sexuality educators, pleasure advocates, and ridiculous, sadistic kinksters. We're also non-monogamously married to each other. So strap in or strap one on. In this house, your pleasure is power. Your kink is customizable. And your subversive perversions are revolutionary. Hey friends, welcome to episode 203 of American Sex. Okay, so what do you get when in a BDSM conference ballroom, that's the bowl, go with my whole analogy, you mix one part Mollena Williams-Haas and about, 50 or so parts of other humans lined up near out the door to connect one-on-one with Mollena, the key ingredient in our post-keynote speech leather conference cake. I don't know. I was really trying to keep with the whole recipe metaphor thing. It was good, right? I was trying to keep it going, but it was falling apart. I tried. It was like I tried, but I had no baking soda. It fell apart. Anyway, what you get is all the generational healing, an impromptu passing of the torch, reinvigorated and re-energized to make kinky, leather, sex-positive spaces and related chosen families even better. And bonus, which icing on the cake. You and I, we get the same thing, but through the butterfly wing ripple effects that all of that magic has created. We get to have our cake and eat it too. Oh God, I need to stop. Anyway, Mollena shares with us the transformative power that she unexpectedly unleashed when she reluctantly at the time popped back into the leather and BDSM community after not being around for a while. For many years, this community was her very accepting chosen family, but like family often does, at least for some of us, it just kept doing her dirty, and not in the fun, kinky way. And then she slowly just disconnected, disengaged, and didn't really feel like she resonated with that community anymore. But this one chance instance at this one event was different. And it taught her a lot about how much communities can change and grow and how much we as people change and grow. And of course, in true Mollena fashion, yes, this is kind of a personal story, but she unearths the life lessons and the grander revelations about how her experience taps into like more than just, hey, this is a cool story. But her takeaways are transferable to you, to me, to them, to everyone, and how we do or don't interact with the kink community, and also really any community, because this is one of those transferable life lessons. When you boil communities down to their lowest common denominators, a lot of times the trials and tribulations of those communities are very similar at their core. The dynamics and, especially now it's the 2020s America. We're all at the same time going through some shit. Like we are sharing the dysfunction. So grab a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, because this conversation between Mollena and myself is one of those, right? Like you are more than just a fly on a wall. And I mean, unless you're into being a fly on a wall, like then get on with your bad self, buzz. I promise I won't smash you. Unless you want. It's a whole thing. Anyway, you're going to be right there with us in this conversation. It is a good one. And it's good and it's long, so long that it's a 2-parter. So yeah, you have got Mollena for 2 American Sex Podcast episodes in a row. And I know y'all are jumping for joy. And if you're like, wait, everyone's jumping for joy, I haven't heard an episode with Mollena yet. You are in for a treat. Oh my goodness. Let me tell you about Mollena first. So Mollena Williams-Haas is a delicate, trembling flower of submission. That's a quote and a copyright. A New York City-born and raised writer, actress, BDSM educator, storyteller, and sobriety fiend since March of 2007. She's also an award-winning executive pervert, owned and collared by renowned contemporary composer Georg Friedrich Haas since 2013. Also his wife. She serves as his beloved slave, submissive wife, all the things, servant, muse. They have been featured in the New York Times. There was a documentary, The Artist and the Pervert, about them. Go watch it. I think it's on Amazon Prime. I will try to find it and put it in the show notes. And Mollena is always sought after in the media about her viewpoints on kink and BDSM. And I'm talking like big media, New York Times level stuff, Newsweek, Essence, NPR, you got it, all the things. Mollena got into kink and BDSM in the 1990s. She's also a leather title holder, which you'll hear about. And she's been a BDSM educator since the late 90s as well. Even speaks at like Harvard, Princeton. Yeah, like the big stuff. Book author. There's lots of stuff. I'm just going to send you to the show notes to read Mollena's beefy bio, because she's also a child actor and like an adult actor. But Mollena was in The Wiz, like Ease on Down the Road, and like America's Deadliest Home Video with Danny Bonaducci. Lots and lots of stuff. Her latest is Hyena, a film and a stage show, a collaboration with her husband. Yeah, just lots of stuff. Also, she was on my TV show, Sex with Sunny Megatron, on our segment on race play. Mollena is one of the foremost experts in all sorts of taboo plays, which we'll touch on in our conversation as well. So lots of stuff. Oh my God, I'm so excited. There's a couple things you may hear in the conversation because it's a 2-parter. I don't know what part the context is. So I'm just like, gonna, just in case something's confusing, just give you a few pointers of things we talk about. So when Mollena talks about Der Spousmeister, that's her owner and husband, Georg. And Mollena talks a lot about being a kink doula. It is Mollena's new, I don't even want to call it a business. I guess it's more of like incarnation, next step in life, because the awesomeness that is this woman can do the world a lot of good, like working out the really freaky shit that we fantasize about that we're too embarrassed to tell anyone about. Anyway, lots of stuff. Before we get to that, however, we need to wash the balls real quick. Here we go. There's that ball washing noise. So this is where I briefly tell you about other things we've got going on. In other words, it's what we call housekeeping here on American Sex. So I wanted to first give you a really quick recap on what I talked y'all's ear off about in our last episode's intro, the one with Mike Stabile talking about Pornhub. And this is important and it's time sensitive and it bears repeating and hearing again. And it's about censorship and about concerns over the so-called TikTok ban, a.k.a. the Resist Act, Senate Bill 686. It is still out there. So you may have heard like, oh, the bills, there's been a few TikTok bills. As of right now, the day this episode drops, the Restrict Act is still alive and kicking. And in a nutshell, this Restrict Act, if passed, and it's got very strong bipartisan support, and it looks like it will pass, it gives the Secretary of Commerce the power with little to no checks and balances to, quote, take any action necessary, end quote, to shut down information and communications technologies, products or services, anything, when they're connected to a foreign adversary of the United States. So, and also they quote, pose a undue and unacceptable risk to national security of the U.S. and U.S. citizens. So basically what that boils down to is it's almost, or opens the door for a full-on ban of free use of the internet in the US, kind of like, we're North Korea style. Like it allows for surveillance of home and personal devices, like home networks, game consoles, Ring cameras, your apps, your websites, your email, like you name it. Immediate shutdown or regulation of any app with over 1 million users without reason, cause, majority vote. Just like, oh, it's threatening, which we don't know what that means. Connected to what does that mean? And if we're saying that's China, like we're so global in business now, could that be? And that's very ill-defined. And, you're like, whatever, what the hell ever, we have VPNs. No, because if you try to get around it and use a VPN, you get up to $1 million fine and up to 20 years in prison. And I'm not joking. So please, this is why I'm telling you about it. Contact all of your state representatives, your lawmakers. I will have links in the show notes how to do that. It's actually really, really easy to do. And I give you a few options, but there is support for this on all sides. It's bipartisan. And just recently, a few more folks in the government are standing up going, hey, wait a minute. Did y'all read this bill? So help. It's a lot. So that bears repeating. If you want some more detail, go back to our last episode with Mike Stabile and listen to my spiel. I kind of rhymed or alliterated or something, where I really get into the implications of the Restrict Act. Okay. With all that out of the way, just a couple more quick things. I love this conversation with Mollena so much that we actually recorded it on video. If you're one of my patrons or one of Mollena's patrons, if you're listening to this on episode drop day, like in a day or so, you will get that video dropped to you. And it's both parts, part 1 and 2, the whole conversation at once. Just a part of the perks of being either or both of Mollena or my patrons. So if you want to find out more about that, the links to both of our Patreon pages are in the show notes, a.k.a. the episode description, in addition to all sorts of stuff, things we talk about in the episode, our sponsor links to coupons and discounts and deals and freebies and all sorts of things. Oh, my free kink negotiation workbook, the link to our Discord, come join us, all that stuff. And lastly, if you enjoy American sex, please tell your friends, tell your partners, tell the people at your local dungeon, whatever it is. And also consider leaving us a review too. We would love it. That's it. These balls are now clean. Squeaky, squeaky, sparkly, sparkly. Here is part 1 of my conversation with Mollena Lee Williams-Haas about lessons from and about the leather BDSM community. I have been watching you on the sidelines. That makes you sound creepy. Like this is like an episode of Netflix's You. I've been watching you, Mollena.
Yeah, but the thing is that my stalkers are all rad.
Yeah. Oh, yay, yay. So I have observed from afar you doing lots of really cool stuff this year. One of which is like, jumping back into like leather events. I got wind of like some kind of title or something. I'm sure you'll get to that. So the foreshadowing. So what is this all about? Because I know you can't do anything big without like your brilliant brain sucking out the like, this is the life lesson moral of the story, and I'm going to share it with everyone else. So what is it? Let's get into it.
I should say first, for folks who are just like, what the fuck does that mean? Because I'm going to talk about like a leather event. People are like, what the hell is that? So you have to understand that most people who are involved in kink or BDSM are some flavor of dork, nerd, or dweeb. Like 99% of us have that flavor. We might be also cool kids, because I would fall squarely, because in high school I was like one of the cool theater kids, but I also was a nerd because I went to nerd school. And so when you get into sub communities and you get into lifestyles, it's a lot of nerds and geeks, because if you're going to dedicate that amount of time, energy, effort, and focus to one topic, like, I don't know, spanking or whatever, there's got to be something in your brain that's like, geeky, nerdy, weird in that way. And so, of course, when you get geeks and nerds wanting to do shit, they want to do shit in front of other people. They want to talk about it. And this evolved from smaller gatherings into conferences. And a kink conference probably has stuff like classes, probably has stuff like meetups, almost definitely has stuff like parties where people can go and get their freak on in front of a bunch of other people. These often happen at like huge hotels. You'll have a hotel that's sold out only to 700 perverts all doing pervert shit. You add to that level the leather community, which is, this is debatable and people will fight and die on this hill, but leather community specifically refers to people not just who are leather fetishists per se, but it also encompasses the sort of protocol, etiquette, formality that people who are into leather dig. The uniforms or the lack thereof, the straps and harnesses, the boots, all of these things that encompass that leather look, but it also encompasses a leather lifestyle. And under that sort of rubric and under that umbrella, you have things like leather contests, which started off as just bar contests at gay bars, right? There would be like a gay leather bar where you'd have like hot gay men doing hot gay shit. And then they started having leather nights where they would have a contest for like Mr. Eagle. And then 10 guys would get up and whoever was the hottest would be Mr. Eagle for that year. And they'd get a little patch and then they would compete against other bars. And this grew until eventually you had the International Mr. Leather contest where hot gay men would come from all over the world, from a whole contest system, not dissimilar to Miss America and Miss Universe and all of those things. It's a similar thing where you'll have local contests that then feed into regional contests.
Mm-hmm. That's how I explained it to my daughter, because we lived in Chicago where IML was, and yes. She was in the car with me. I think I might have been dropping off Ken at IML, and she was like, she probably was 8 or 9 or something, maybe 10 at the time. And she's like, wow. First she goes, wow, they all look like firemen. Because like when you're at IML, it's like from blocks around, there's just like gay leathermen everywhere. Yes. And then she's like, well, what is it? And I said, I'm like, okay, so like Miss America? I'm like, Miss America for like the gay leather community. And she was like, cool, yes.
And so you have like this subculture within the subculture. And it was something when I first heard about it, I said, okay, well, that's nice. You get to have camaraderie, you get to get a sash, you get to be pretty. And it made so much sense for the men's community. And then, of course, after a while, women were like, we want to do this too. So you had International Ms. Leather, which is not as huge and as supported financially, for example, as International Mr. Leather. So you already have that gap. Unsurprisingly, even within the queer communities, there's a gap between what cisgender men are doing and making and earning financially and, queer women, right? Mm-hmm. So you've always had this sort of gap between the two. And when I was still living in San Francisco, there had not been a local Miss San Francisco Leather contest for a long time, even though there had been Mr. San Francisco Leather, and then Mr. San Francisco Leather consistently, whoever won that would go on to compete at International Mr. Leather, representing the Bay Area, right? Mm-hmm. And so in 2009, I was sitting in the local kink bar, coffee house, Wicked Grounds, which is the pervert coffee house in San Francisco, because of course there's a pervert coffee house. And someone came in and was handing out flyers and was like, Miss San Francisco Leather Contest has been started up again after a decade of being fallow. And I was like, why are they doing that? What is the fucking point of that? And immediately 3 people were like, Mo, you should run. You should run for Miss San Francisco Leather. I was like, why? Why should I fucking run? I'm not even sure what the purpose of this is. And I'll tell you, girl, that's why I ran. Because I was curious as to what the fuck it was about and why people did it. And I said, this is the best way for me to find out. I had like less than a month to prepare. And so I just was like, well, I had to get together like an auction basket because you have to do fundraising. That's a big aspect of it. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it's about donating money to charity. So I had to, get all this stuff together. And so I did. And then I ran for Miss San Francisco Leather and won that contest and was like, shit, all right, well, I guess, now that I won that, it was my obligation as the title holder to go run for International Ms. Leather. And I fucked around and won that contest too. So I was like, boom, now I'm International Ms. Leather. And at the time I was already traveling all over the world, doing a lot of teaching, doing a lot of presenting. And so it fit well into my lifestyle. Fast forward to, I had left the Bay Area around 2010, 2011, was living in New York, and was trying to get my life together and figure out how to make a living here. What I wanted to do was to be able to dedicate my life to this. I was like, I want to be a presenter. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a writer. And I fought so hard to make that happen. The roadblock I kept running up against, particularly in the leather community, was the idea that everything you do should be for the community for free, that you are committing an act of service. And it was crass and disrespectful, actually, to ask for money.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. If someone has spent 14, 18 hours building a flogger, for example, you're not going to walk up to that person and say, how much did that leather cost you? $10? Great, here's $10. When they're charging you $250 for that flogger. What you're paying for is the time, energy, effort, and expertise it takes to fucking make that goddamn flogger, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my talent, energy, and expertise is not something you should pay me for, because I should give it to you for free. And over the course of a decade, I got slowly worn down, blacklisted from events, told I was disrespectful, told I would never, ever darken the door of several events, got ripped off by a couple of people who promised they would just cover my expenses and then didn't. So it became an issue. And probably around just before I met the Spouse-Meister, I started hearing that I had retired. Right? Like I would post something and someone was like, oh, I thought you retired. I heard you retired. I heard you weren't doing community shit anymore. And I was like, where is this coming from? Well, it's coming from the fact that so many people had decided that I was persona non grata because, God forbid, I should fight for presenters to be paid, that they just were like, well, she's not teaching anymore. And it's like, no, I'm not teaching for free.
Right.
And there were, again, on top of that, a couple of big community meltdowns where, for example, a leather bar in the Pacific Northwest, the Eagle in Portland, which is one of the most established, respected leather institutions in America, invited a drag queen whose whole act is blackface.
Yes.
To come and perform. And I thought it was something that I didn't think this would be a problem, but it was a problem and ripped through my social life like a fucking tornado. The number of white people who refused to my face to step up and say, you know what, blackface is wrong. And that's all I wanted people to say. You know, I had, you know, my people I've worked with closely, people whose names are next to mine on things that will never go away, declined to step up to the plate and just put out a post that said, blackface is wrong.
Wow.
You know, Leathermen I had respected for decades, I found out that they thought it was funny and they thought that I was overreacting. Other people of color, for example, there's plenty of Black people who aren't American who don't get what the problem is because they don't know about that history. And so, you know, some other Black people would say, well, we don't see the problem. And then I was the one who was freaking out and overreacting. So that was another sort of push towards the margins. And I was like, why am I kicking and struggling to stay here? And then I met the Spouse-Meister, and then it was sort of like, okay, well, he really wants to be involved in the community. So I was pushing to try to get us to do stuff. And then I was just sort of discouraged because a lot of leather events are not sexually centered anyway. It's about protocol.
Right.
It's about talking about stuff. It's about, you know, whatever. And so there are entire leather events, for example, that don't have dungeon play space that I've been to a couple of times. And so the focus seemed to have leaned away from that. And I was really focused on our relationship, focused on doing that, discouraged. And so it wasn't like I was saying no, but nothing was really coming up. I was working on trying to sort of educate through social media a lot. You know, thanks to you, I started trying to at least get like a few videos up there on TikTok, and I got my podcast rolling. So at least I can say, look, even if I'm not actively active in your face, my shit is out there to be found by those who need it. And so I felt like that was a step in the right direction. And then last winter, I guess it would have been winter, I guess late winter, I got a call from a woman who I've known for a very long time from the San Francisco community, Tomo, who I knew from running for Miss San Francisco Leather and then running for International Miss Leather. Tomo was like at the heart of the leather community there and had been for years. And she called me and said, you can't talk to anyone about this, but I'm going to be taking over the International Master Slave Contest and Weekend, and my inaugural year will be 2023, and I want you to come and keynote. And I was like, it was like that fucking like Corleone moment where he's like, every time I think I'm out, they keep pulling me back in. And I said, you know what, Tomo, because I love and respect you and the work you've done, I'll do this. But my assumption was that it was going to be the same shit, that I was going to walk in there and feel again as though I was not slavey enough. Because this is the thing, once you have a subculture that is established sort of its ground rules, as it were, there's often going to be a who is the most, right? And in the leather community, it's who is the most masterful, who is the most slavish, what does slavery look like? And you start getting these cookie cutter ideas of what dominance is, what submission is, what a master is, what a slave is. And I never fit into any of those boxes. And it was a struggle for the first few years I was exploring, because I truly believed that I could not be the type of slave who was perfect in silence and who was the invisible will of their dominant, that I was not to be a slave, right? I figured out that was all bullshit, and that the type of slave I was the type of person I was with slavery added to it, not that I had to twist myself into fucking knots to be that. But that also meant that I was like the unplaceable puppy at the end of the line for 15 years.
Yeah.
I had great relationships, but I was never, formally collared. None of those things came to me. And a lot of that was because I had other shit in my life I needed to get together. When you're an active alcoholic, probably not the best time. And then when you're getting sober and getting your life together, still not the best time, right? So I had a lot of emotional shit going into this weekend. And I also had the added pressure of being one of those people who does not write speeches. And so I've never written a speech in my life. I've given many, but I don't write them. I come up with 3 things I want to say. I let them marinate. And then I get up on stage and I channel, whatever spirits, whoever's in the room, whatever. And I just say the shit. And so I was like, am I going to get up on stage and be like vomiting bitterness and bile? Fuck these hoes! You've been shitting on me for the past. Like, I legitimately was like, that could be what comes out, is this anger and this frustration that the community has really just pooped on me, and not just me, a bunch of other people, etc. So I get to this conference, and first and foremost, just the vibe when I first walked in was amazing, because the first maybe 20 or so people I saw, more than half of them were not white. And this was very unusual for a kink event, period. For a leather event, definitely. For a master slave event, no.
Wow.
No. And so I was like, because Tomo, who is white, had expressed to me her frustration with the uniformity of the scene in general. She laid out for me the shit that she was doing in order to create a safe space for various groups and individuals. And unfortunately, when white people say they're going to do shit and then show me their work and I see evidence of their work, my commitment is to support them. And the fortunate thing is that rarely fucking happens. So I get to sit on my ass a lot. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But then when someone steps up, you're like, fuck. All right.
Yeah.
And so to walk up to that hotel and see a bunch of visibly brown faces was the first clue I had that this shit was not the same shit to which I had become accustomed. The opening ceremony for the event started with a land dedication and a group of indigenous people doing a thing. And I've seen that before. But what I had not seen before was 12 indigenous people, all from various representing various groups, who did an invocation. They did their invocation. They didn't do the sort of adapted, broken up. They did what indigenous people do when they are trying to create a space for healing, right? They did that prayer, and they brought that shit in the room. And my beloved Spousmeister, who was a musician and a sound genius, lost his mind because he was like, what they're doing with sound and with their voices is like magic to me. And so he, after this opening ceremony, was like, I got to find the woman who did this invocation. And half an hour later, they're like forehead to forehead crying in each other's faces because of the connection they had to music. This is an old white man from Austria who was raised by Nazis and an indigenous woman. They would never have met under any other circumstances but here. And so you had this amazing coming together, like boom, day one. I was like, holy shit, some shit is going on here, right? And then you had there's something called the Carter Johnson Leather Library, which is these two women who are basically the grandmas of the leather community. And they have started a library, which is basically a way to save this history of alternative sexuality that is frequently just thrown away or burned. And this was the first time. The library now has like 5 different annexes all over the US. So now there's like all these people across the country who are dedicated to preserving and gathering this history. And all of them were gathered together and had this room where you had people from all over the United States, sharing their history and sharing their stories. I was like, God, that's amazing. And I didn't personally myself attend any classes, but I was like, I got to do this keynote. I got to keep my shit together. There were some people there who I had not seen in a long time who I was fine with that. I was like, if I don't see you again, that's cool. I don't, it's not an issue. And then I started to soften though, because I started having people coming up to me and saying, oh, you might not remember me, but I saw you do a class in like 2009 and in 2001, in like 93, whatever, 93 would be too early, but like 99. And it really changed the way I thought about blah. And so I started to get these reminders, A, of the fact that I've been doing this for a few minutes, and B, shit that I said that I had no way even to recollect impacted folks. Like I had no idea. And it started to land. I was like, wow. So despite the fact that I feel like I'm yelling into the dark with my podcast, or maybe no one cares if I'm in the community or out, I've already done a lot of work that has helped people. And that shit turns me on. Like that fucking gets me hard. That's what I want to know, is that I did something that mattered to someone else. Like that's my fucking food right there. And so I started to get those little morsels, by the first day, by just getting there. By the second day, I was just like, oh my God. And so that Saturday, there was they had 2 different big fundraising meals. One was a brunch that was a Q&A with Mo Williams, and I get to interview by Tomo, who was the host of the conference, and it's a very fun sort of lighthearted thing, and it was really great and delightful. You can also hear that part on my podcast. It was posted, I think, last week. So that was really fun and really awesome and really great. And then I had the keynote coming that Sunday morning, and still by Sunday, I was really plugged back into who I was at these events. Like a part of me that I had forgotten, because it's not that I'm bullshitting. It's not that I have a character that I'm putting on, but there's an aspect of myself that's more out there at these events. It's just, I think we're all sort of multifaceted creatures. Totally. And some facets turn to the light more readily than others. And who I am as a leather woman, as a slave, as a submissive, is not necessarily who I walk around when I'm going to the fucking rib shack. Right. So to be able to have that aspect of myself like in full force was amazing. And then, now it's Sunday morning. I've been soaking in this amazing energy. I'm getting up on stage. I'm looking out at the faces of like, my leather mom and my husband and owner, and, the woman we have now welcomed into our leather family, and all of this other shit. And I just started talking, and I wish I could. I can't quote myself because I'm very bad at that, and I actually haven't listened to it all the way through again because I hate listening to my voice. But apparently I said some shit, because like within 15 minutes into the speech, like half the room was in tears. like people just broke down, like sobbing into their scrambled eggs.
I have seen you speak, even, when maybe you weren't as emotional or like in that place and I can see that. You could a whole ballroom, like water floating.
And then I was moved to, and then I was like, this is this and that. But then I specifically addressed the people of color in the room. And specifically spoke to the Black folks in the room, and specifically, was like, this was not who I saw. This was not where we were 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And I talked about some of my own pain and the shit that really fucked me over and feeling pushed out and wondering why I was still here. Sort of the through line was the why. Like, why did I get here? Like, why am I here in the first place? And then why did I stay? And then why did I come back after sort of this slow fade? And by the end of the speech, I was just like, okay, I think I said what I needed to say. And this is when shit got crazy. I came off of stage and immediately was surrounded by 4 other Black women. And they all were like, in that full, raw, open space. And they all said, you are our why. We stayed here because we saw who you were. You were the woman who was here for us. Because I talked in my speech about seeing, Jill Carter and Vi Johnson when I first came into the scene, and saying, well, if they're here, I'm going to stick around too. Because there's not a lot of people looking like me out in the scene in the Bay Area back in the mid-late 90s. I had seen at that point maybe 2 other Black people. So to be at this event where there were dozens just in that one room alone, and then to have like Black women surround me and hold me and say, not just you're okay, but like you matter. And you matter to me in my life as a leather woman, as a Black woman. After I had shared previous rejections from other Black women in the scene, for various reasons, and I talked about that. Like, there had been a Black women's tea group that I had been a part of it broke my heart open, because when I first came into the scene, there weren't enough of us to have tea together. And then after about a year of meeting, maybe not even a year, I was voted off of the Black women's tea group because I was harming Black people by talking about race play in the kink context. And apparently the number of women involved in this group who thought that I was toxic was higher than the women who did not.
Wow.
And that wound was so deep because, for fuck's sake, like, to have people who look like you tell you to, like, not even to your face, just to dismiss you as toxic. After I worked so hard to release the guilt and shame, it was bad. It was bad. And so the healing that came about by having these younger women say to me that I was there for them, like it just destroyed me in the best possible way.
Here you are, listening to a podcast. You know what that tells me about you? That you are really into oral pleasures. And Dipsy has them for you. Wait, no, not O-R-A-L, A-U-R-A-L, like your ears, like here. I mean, actually, Dipsy has that too, if that's what you're into. Dipsy is an app full of hundreds of short, sexy audio stories designed by women for women. Their immersive soundscapes and realistic characters bring scenarios to life, like there's stories about second chance romances, adventurous vacation flings, and steamy hookups. And Dipsy has stories for straight and queer listeners too, plus over half are voice acted by people of color. Oh, and they've got celebrities too. Get ready to hear Sharonis J. Jackson, ER Fightmaster, and Luke Cook like you have never imagined. And not only is new content added every week, they also bring the variety with soothing sleep stories, wellness sessions, and sexy stories you can read too. With Dipsy, you can let your imagination run wild and spice up your me time, explore your fantasies, relax and unwind, or heat things up with someone special. For listeners of American Sex Podcast, Dipsea is offering an extended 30-day free trial when you go to dipseastories.com/sunny. That's SUNNY. Yeah, that's 30 days of full access for free when you go to dipseastories.com/sunny. That's dipseastories.com/sunny.
You know, there's more to life than just vanilla sex with one person. So let's talk about it. Hi guys, this is Cami. And this is Nikki. And we are Double Team Podcast. Are you DTF? Come join the Double Team fam every Thursday anywhere you listen to podcasts. Bring an open mind, your favorite butt plug, and let's talk kink, non-monogamy, and sexuality. Sex parties, threesomes, maybe a little bit of knife play, all things we know and love. We hope this is a safe space for you to learn, explore, and share some laughs with us along the way. And come be our bestie. Connect with us on social media. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and more. All of these links are available on our website, doubleteamedpodcast.com. We are so glad that you're here and we can't wait to get to know you. Don't forget, wear condoms.
Have you ever felt judged for your sexual choices or your sexuality? Ever been called a slut? Whether you're in politics, a parent, a sex worker, or just wearing a short dress, people make assumptions about you, your character, and your ability to be a competent professional based on who you did last night. My name is Nicoletta Heidegger, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and sexologist, and I am here to invite you to join me in taking back the word slut on my podcast, Sluts and Scholars. Sluts and Scholars is an interview-style podcast that features diverse professionals who also like and value sex, or at least talking about it. Join in as we discuss how to navigate sexuality in this culture by having conversations that will help you talk smart and fuck smarter. With a wide array of sex-positive and shame-free topics, there is something for you to elevate your pleasure. Sluts and Scholars is a proud member of the Pleasure Podcast Network, and you can find out more info, subscribe, and listen at slutsandscholars.com.
And so the healing that came about by having these younger women say to me that I was there for them, like this just destroyed me in the best possible way.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
It was completely, it reformed my whole perspective, like in those minutes with them holding me.
Wow. Wow.
And one of these women was a woman with whom I had beef for a while. And so like she came up and was like, wow. And I was like, oh shit, is this going to be healed too? I was like, girl, it's nuts. And then after this like bombshell ritual, where literally like, I'd say probably a third of the room was still there. Just waiting.
Oh my gosh.
Like, I have to say something to you, but we need to like just witness this. So like there was this cluster of Black women in the center, centered and just doing our thing, while everyone else just stood back and held space for us. When do you see that shit happening? I've never seen that.
Wow.
I've never seen that.
Wow. Yeah. Two quick things for the American fuckers listening along who have not had the pleasure of being listening to a Mollena episode or Mollena's podcast, and you're like, race play, husband was raised by Nazis. What? I'll put in the show notes the other couple of episodes so you can catch up, and most podcasts and all that stuff, and like because they're probably like, wait, I missed an episode somewhere. What's that?
Yeah, put it in the description. Link them up.
But as I hear this, and knowing you and looking back at the impact that you've had, even before I've known you, like just looking back at your history in this community, it's like you are one of those rare people. And I hate fucking catchphrases and shit and cliches, but it's kind of true, like that, like ahead of your time trailblazer. Like you were saying this stuff and humanizing the things and living the things and recognizing the things that so many people just weren't there yet, and it's like, it's one of those things like you're out there all on your own. People are like, you can't come to tea, and it took a minute for folks to catch up and to really see your value and like how, again, the cliche, but it's true, like ahead of your time in a lot of senses that you were when it came to this kind of stuff. So,
it was, I have to say, part of what gave me hope was your like nudging me to go onto TikTok, because it's not without its bullshit, but the fact that the majority of people, non-kinky people, reacted by saying, this is consensual, what's the problem? Like that was a shift that I have seen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was not how it was 10 years ago. And to have other kinky folks say, well, I don't do it, but I need to actually support your right to do it, is also a sea change, because the judgmental nature of perverts is well known, right? Like kinky people are even worse than non-kinky people when it comes to judging kinks. Getting the support from folks on TikTok was amazing because it was not just kinky people. Right. And kinky people, super judgmental, super awful. Oh, yeah. The whole idea, like I all of my non-kinky friends, when I talk about race play and talk about getting shit for it, they were like, well, why is that different than, pretending to be a schoolgirl? Like, that's also kind of fucked up. Right. And I'm like, yeah, it is. It is. However, everyone seems to think that's okay because, we've been watching Britney Spears videos for so long. And prior to that, watching movies like Lolita or Pretty Baby or Taxi Driver, where that was okay. And so we've been broken to assume that fetishizing little girls is okay, but actually talking about the issues of race and racism and how that impacts our sexuality is not. So holy shit. So I'm fucking at this conference after years of feeling like, not like just a pariah, but like not even a part of. And not useful, man. Like, this is the thing that I try to explain to people. If I feel like I'm not doing any good, I don't want to be somewhere. I'm not a consumer. Like, I can't just be there and consume. I have to be doing something. That's my whole shtick. So after this amazing, magical moment with these women, I was just sort of like it was the first time, you hear like these woo people talk about like connection to earth and sky and like just running energy. And I was like, I know what they're talking about now. And so at this point now, there were like maybe 50 people standing in a line that just snaked around the fucking ballroom. And I was like, okay, let's do this. And so the next person came up and embraced me and was in tears, and the next person and the next. And I had seen before the woman who is my leather mom, Vi, do this, where she just held in her presence person after person and just poured love and everything else. And I was just like, bitch, I don't even know how people do that. After the fifth person, I'd just be like, goodbye, we're done. I need like a beverage. I need to sit down, get out of my face. But what I realized was that when I'm in this flow, it wasn't even about that. It was literally just about these energetic creatures who were coming up to me and showing me their heart. And the energy that I took from that, like every person, I got a little bit higher. Like I felt a little bit more open. I felt more ready to hear what the next person had to say or share. And it was electrifying. Wow. And I realized that my being alive and existing helps other people. I don't have to do anything, right? Like I don't have to write that speech. I just have to say the words in my head at that moment. I don't have to be this particular type of submissive in order to fulfill my own destiny. I can just be who I am. And that's what people see, right? Like I didn't know people saw me. I had no idea. Like, how would you know? And then if one person says to you, you make a difference, like there's this whole sort of advertising trope that for every person who says something, there are 100 people who don't. You know, like if you fill out a card to say, hey, thank you for your for your service, Olive Garden lady. There have been 100 other people that Olive Garden lady was really nice to and did very well, but those people won't, so you have to extrapolate that out. And so after like this, people after people, and this is the thing, it was brown people, it was white people, it was, people who had just turned old enough to attend this event, and someone who was like over 80 years old, like it was this broad spectrum of humanity who were all coming up and telling me that I mattered.
Ooh. Wow.
And that I had helped them. And I was fucking destroyed. I was like, I didn't know. I had no idea.
Wow.
And it was not just what I needed. It was obviously what everyone else needed.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so to have these people say, yeah, we need you here. You need to come back. Your words and your presence is important and vital to the health of this community. Like I hadn't felt that in years, man. Like in years.
Wow.
It was so much. And it was so, especially because I, have had recent difficulties with birth family shit. And part of my withdrawal also is not trusting people to have my back. And realizing that the concept of chosen family, which might sound easy to say, and everyone thinks they know what that is. But this is what I shared. I was like, look, I realize that the leather community is very much like family. And much like family, there are people you don't want to fucking deal with.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Like chosen family doesn't mean that everyone is perfect. Chosen family means that, yes, there's your favorite cousin, but there's also creepy Uncle Larry that everyone knows not to leave the kids with, right?
Yeah.
Like there's everybody in there. And so, part of what I said, I think, was that I wanted to also acknowledge that. Is that not all of you as my family are there because you're making my life easier. Some of you are there and you're making my life more difficult. And that's part of what family means.
Mm-hmm.
And having that trust and being able to look into the eyes of hundreds of people and see that my existence matters was some shit.
Whew.
It was so huge. And it continues to be huge, like as I'm sitting with this and realizing that part of what, and then the final devastation was, talking to the woman who's like my leather mom, and her saying to me, the gift that you gave me today was seeing that I can now sit on the porch and have my tea and know that the torch has been passed.
Ooh.
And I was like, fucking, like, to know that I'm part of that tradition in that lineage, essentially. And to know that like Black women are at the center of this community and holding it down generation after generation, that is not bullshit. And this is part of what I said, to the Black folks in the room. I was like, don't let them take this from us. This is ours more than theirs even. I was like, our DNA is carrying some shit that they don't have. And it's our responsibility to be true to ourselves to get our needs met, even though the default world might be telling us that we're a fucking mess because we're playing in this arena. I said, being in a Black body and doing SM and doing master slave relationships doesn't make it any more fucked up, but it does make it more textured in a lot of ways. It's a different texture and flavor for us. And the idea that we can see ourselves reflected in other folks that we admire and we think are doing the shit and living their lives authentically is a fucking gift. And the fact that now there's so many of us that I can look around and say, oh my God, yeah, we're here. We're here and this is ours. And you don't get to push us to the margins and you don't get to be centered and you have to share. Because if you don't, we're just going to take it back without you, and we're going to be way more awesome than you in your little flavorless corner over there. So enjoy.
Yeah. Wow.
Bro, it was a lot. It's still a lot. It's still a lot.
Man, I've little chills, little hairs, little.
Yeah.
Damn. So like, I can't even imagine everything that was in you and all of the, like, how long were you like a love scramble, after that? Or are you still?
It's still ongoing, I will say, because people are like, con drop. And I was like, I said, I think I had con bounce. Like I sort of landed and then was like, choo. And what's interesting is that I had 2 days where I was like, kind of just general malaise sort of sick, and people like, con drop, like, no, it's not con drop, it's not drop. It's I think what happened was like I just had a what is that called when like a breaker flips?
Oh yeah. You just
it was like a psychic breaker flip. It was like, you need to get offline because you cannot pull down this much energy for 9 days straight.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I was just like, okay, let's like take a step back and breathe and still enjoy it and still live in it. But to have that much adulation poured into you, like I was like, I don't know how people who are legit rock stars do it, because that amount of energy just from like a few hundred people was a lot. And I'm like, multiply that by like, a Lizzo concert. And I was just like, I was like, I guess I just have to get bigger. I just need to be bigger and bigger and bigger so I can embrace and recycle all of this love and energy, because that's what we need right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I need right now. That's what I need to, like, being the change I need to see in the fucking world. What I want to see is people accepting that much love.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize until I sort of came down off of that breaking point that it's really hard for me. I am not good at being awesome. I am not good at accepting praise. I am not adept at fully realizing my own potential for power and strength. Like, I'm just shit at it. And it makes me sad, because if I'm bad at it, I can only imagine that people who don't have all of that adulation poured into them at any time must struggle with it when it does come.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's like knowing, again, it's like, you can't really see yourself the way that people appreciate you, but like listening, of course there's part of me that's like, whoa, magic, hairs on the back of my neck stand up. But the other part of me is like, well, duh, you're Mollena, of course.
What does that even mean though, man? Like, the things that like, are you ever not your worst self? Right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Am I ever not like alcohol, like living in hoarder level conditions, ready to drink herself to death? Like, that's my baseline. Am I ever like the poor kid who got grounded for stealing laundry quarters so she could play Miss Pac-Man? Like, these are the things that my soul holds on to. But every once in a while, you get that glimpse into the sort of screaming void of awesome, where you're just like, oh my God, I'm so cool. Wait.
The portal is closed. I can no longer see it anymore.
And I just feel so fortunate to have that glimpse into that. And having just started last week with my first sessions doing work as the Kink Doula, I realized that my ability to say, yeah, I'm fucking awesome, and kink and SM is part of that, and let's see where your kinky freakiness can be of assistance to you, is amazing already. Just having these conversations with people is it's so educational for me, just to see how much people's faces light up when you can tell them about themselves, when you can just be like, oh, okay, so you identify as a bottom, so that means you like to do stuff for people. So how has that helped you to avoid being taken advantage of, right? So like, having someone realize that they're being submissive actually means that they have to be better about their boundary maintenance, and having them realize that has empowered them. Like, haha, light bulb moment. I was like, of course, like, to me, that's obvious. But like, if you are not accustomed to that thought process and you listen to the rest of the world, then you being submissive means that you're weak and you have no agency.
Yeah.
And I'm there to tell you, I am a Black woman who identifies as a submissive and a slave. If I can take those words and I can see how they are powerful for me in this relationship, that's fucking dope as hell. Right? Like I was talking to my therapist a couple weeks ago, and I was telling her about like my propensity to martyr myself on the knives of like always do for other people, and so of course my mom came up, and being the oldest child and having to be a breadwinner, right? Like I started working in film and television when I was 6 years old, and my money went to help support the household, and seeing kink and BDSM and being submissive in a structured relationship where it is important and valuable that I take care of myself first, right? And my partner is perpetually acknowledging my work and continuously ad nauseum to exhaustion telling me how fucking amazing I am. I was like, this is actually a harm reduction model for people with pathologies that maybe would get them abused in other scenarios.
Yes.
My therapist was like, oh, she's like furiously writing. I'm like, yeah, write that shit down.
Yes. No, I cannot agree with you more. It's like, I even look back at because I'm a late in life kinkster, and I look back at like, oh shit, like all of the really abusive situations that, I say I got myself into, but I don't want that to be like it was my fault or something. But that's just the way I look at myself, but like, I'm like, yeah, I was trying to play out some of this need for this, but I didn't realize I had options and I could do it in an intentional, safe container. I just found the most outrageously unstable situation I could find, probably subconsciously, because it was exciting to play that role. Yeah. So underline, highlight that, like tell it to your therapist again. I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah.
So many people play out these psychodramas in ways that aren't safe or healthy. And my thing is, consent matters, and it has to be consensual with yourself, right? First and foremost, you have to consent to doing this exploration, to saying, okay, I'm submissive. Okay, I'm dominant. What if I'm a sadist? What if I really want to hurt people? This is part of it. Like I swear to God, I would love to be able to talk to like serial killers, like specifically sadistic serial killers, and say, do you think the perfect example is BTK, right? Dennis Rader.
Yeah.
Because dude started off just doing shit that you and I would not blink at. And he was caught, quote unquote, by his wife in women's lingerie with makeup on, doing self-bondage and taking pictures of himself. And his wife was like freaked out, and they were going to get a divorce. He was like, I promise I'll never do it again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that whole psychodrama was part of his murdering. And my thing is, if he could have just done that with someone who was like, this is fine, dude. No one cares. You want to pretend to tie someone up and have them, like lay there like they're unconscious and fuck them. Yeah, let's do that. Like, would the people have been redirected? Because I can tell you from the other end, I have met at least 2 people in the course of my being in the scene that I am personally certain if they did not find us, we would have been reading about them on the news.
Yeah. And it's so funny that you bring this up, because I'm like, motherfucker, is that another thing we have in common? Like, I used to be like a serial killer historian. I did serial killer tours, and I was really into, like, you hear a lot of true crime people now are just into like, and then she was murdered. It's like, no, I'm more into the psychology, like what has made a person this way, what different factors in their lives. And I agree. And it's not that black and white. It's not like if every serial killer just did some bondage, we'd all be fine. But is it a factor in some? Absolutely, in some of them, and is it a big factor in some? Maybe, yeah. I
think it's got to be. I mean, his cases in particular, because of the fact that it was an escalation from his self-bondage, from his own photography, from his own drawings, from his own fantasies. Other people had different types of escalation, but there's this one. There's one YouTube channel that it's one of these murder porn channels, and it's basically like what is it? Interrogations and interviews.
Ooh.
And they have then a psychologist, a criminologist, and a therapist do commentary. So the voiceover guy will like read the commentary, and they're like, criminal psychologist says, body language specialist says, cop says, going through like what you're watching. And I was like, this is amazing character study shit, because just in terms of acting, like there's so many things that people do subconsciously or consciously to try to divert attention, et cetera, yada, yada. But what was amazing to me about this case in particular was the idea that, like, yeah, he didn't start off wanting to kill people. He started off with these fantasies. And the only way he knew to get people in the positions he wanted was murder.
Yeah.
Because who would ever want to? I'm like, I don't know, me? Like, I don't like hundreds of us out there, bro.
Like I got friends who like have built Dexter rooms in their basement, get a bucket of fake blood, like have a good old time. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, you know, a lot of these folks will say when they see these serial killers will say like, oh, you know, it's because of the kinky, deviant, perverted thoughts that they went on to murder people. And it's like, have you ever stopped to think about it's because they couldn't express those perverted, kinky thoughts that they convinced themselves they were monsters, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you have like cannibal fantasies and you're just like, I don't know, whatever, and you can't even like say I have a cannibal fantasy, then your psychology might start folding in on itself. But if you can just be like, I have a cannibal fantasy, and someone else is like, self-cannibalism, auto-cannibalism, is that, or like stranger cannibalism, family cannibalism, what kind of cannibalism exactly?
Yeah, exactly.
Like if you can talk to that person, you're going to step back for a moment and say, maybe I'm not a monster. And this is part of the reason why I'm perpetually spewing shit on social media. Because if you can talk about that really fucked up shit in a way that shows other people that they're not getting piled on for it, then maybe they come a step closer. They might not ever say anything out loud, but their psychological health has just been improved because they don't feel alone anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it's a thing. And it's, you know, I was talking to a potential client the other day and they were talking about, you know, these fantasies that they had. And I said, you know, and they were sort of hesitant about bringing it up. And I said, look, I have an acquaintance of mine who committed an act of auto-cannibalism at a kinky camp. So if you can think of something further than that in your mind. And she was like, wait, what? Yeah. You know, I've had the same sort of conversations and it's like, they're like, how is that possible? I'm like, well, let's think. And then they're like, oh my God. Yeah, I guess you can do it safely, thoughtfully, you know, or not safe, you know, harm reduction, safe as possible. Because shit can always go wrong, but you don't have to murder someone to get a little thigh meat. Yeah. You do not.
Yeah.
You do not. No one has to die. Right. And so this is part of why I'm super excited about being able to bring that to the rest of the world. So I was like, can I just be famous now? Because I just need my own TV show so I can just be like, you're fine.
Right. Right. Like, let's brainstorm a way that we can get you that without, you know, you having to do something that we're going to read about, you know, because like you know, I hate, again, it's like, I don't know what it is. I think I am secretly attracted to cliches because I did come up with this and it's, if you can think it, you can kink it. You can. There is always a way to figure out how to do the really fucked up thing in a way that it still feels fucked up, but it's not really fucked up.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Are you enjoying the conversation? I know you are, but we got to take a break. This is the end of part 1. To hear part 2, well, come back next episode, or you do know in the podcast dimension, time is different. If it's any time after late April 2023, just go to the next episode in your podcast player. You don't have to wait. Time doesn't exist here. All right. See you on the other side for part 2. Thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to American Sex. What's that? You want more? Well, you can start by streaming our TV show on Showtime, Sex with Sunny Megatron. Then pop on over to sunnymegatron.com. Everything's there. You can get updates on my new book, check out my sex ed and BDSM workshops, learn how to book me for your organization or for coaching. You know, we also want to hang out with you too, right? So come join our Discord community or follow along on TikTok or Instagram, Twitter, all the social media. I'm Sunny Megatron everywhere. And you can catch Ken on Twitter or tune in to his weekly D&D games on Twitch. If you want to support the show, a great way to do that is simply to tell people about it. Make a TikTok or tweet about your favorite part of this episode. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review too. And if you're a ride or die American fucker, you're going to want to join our Patreon community. We'll send you official American Fucker stickers, and you'll get a lot more too at patreon.com/AmericanSex. Now, just in case you happen to be one of the few that still has disposable income in this late-stage capitalist hellscape, well, when you're shopping for a new sex toy, BDSM gear, Kink Academy membership, or other things, please patronize our sponsors and affiliates. You'll get a discount, and it helps us too. Win-win. All those links and codes are in our show notes. Thanks, American Fuckers. We appreciate the heck out of you. See you next time.